Hi, I'm Kevin Turner. Welcome to this week's Realty Talk Show. It hurts. Every day a property remains vacant, and every tenant changeover adds cost and increases revenue loss.
They need to have the understanding of it and the experience at doing it. Reality is it's vital, and it's not about going and picking who's going to do it for the lowest rate. It's who's going to get you the best longevity of tenancies and therefore your best net return.
Full-time property investor, rooming house specialist and owner of Rooming House Expert Mark Baker joins Bushy to discuss maximising rental income and reducing turnover. And then we're joined by Moni Mazzeo, who introduces a different approach to improving rental success by taking an interest in how your property manager handles stress. Before we start, I want to say a special thanks to our supporters and content partners, realty.com.au, BMT Tax Depreciation, Know How Property Finance, Get Rare Property, and Apiro Marketing. And if in fact this is your first time with us, a big welcome. You'll find us on all podcast players and through the Southern Cross Oz Stereo Network, and also now on Hot Copper, Australia's largest investment forum. Hey, if you like the show, hit that subscribe button. Help us to continue to bring you the best guests every week. And don't forget too, you can join the conversation anytime on Facebook at the Property Hub Collective. And we'll be back in just a moment.
Property deductions can save you thousands of dollars each year. To make sure you maximise deductions, you need to work with the most experienced quantity surveyor in the country. BMT Tax Depreciation is the leading specialist in the industry. They've completed over 700,000 tax deduction schedules for residential investment and commercial properties Australia-wide. BMT guarantee to find double your fee in the first full financial year deductions. Call BMT on 1300 728 726 today for an obligation-free quote.
Realty Talk and your host, Bushy Martin.
Now, in a recent episode of Realty Talk, we opened your eyes to the growing rooming house opportunity as an affordable solution for both investors and tenants in our current times of rapidly increasing costs. And this has actually created a flurry of investor interest. So we're keen to discuss more on the subject today. And to state the bleeding obvious, rooming house success relies on maximising your occupancy and reducing resident turnover. But how do you do this? Well, to answer this and to dive further into this alternative investment opportunity, we're joined again by full-time property investor, rooming house specialist and owner of Rooming House Expert, Mark Baker. He specialises in the development, conversion and operation of rooming houses. So welcome back to the show, Mark.
Thanks for having me back.
We had a really good chat last time and keen to sort of dive a little bit deeper into the exercise. And I guess just to kick that off, what are some of the reasons that people move out of rooming houses and how do you prevent that?
Look, some of the things that you probably can't do anything about. They might have had employment in the area and it's come to an end, work contract's done, they're moving on somewhere else. Just part of the game. Maybe keep working with the employers, to keep a steady flow of people if that's the situation. But bigger issues are probably where there's potential for conflict between residents in the house because you've got everyone in much closer proximity. So things are a bit more amplified, and if someone gets on someone's nerves, it can escalate pretty quickly. Disputes about things like heating, for example. I mean, we had stuff early on where we had ducted heating in the house, and you'd get disputes about what temperature people wanted things on. Arguments over noise. If someone likes their music or whatever. So I think the ways to prevent it, first is being pretty active with your management, like having an idea of what's going on in the house, and so you can get on and talk to people as soon as there is any sort of issue. Other things like I mentioned, heating. Individual heating for rooms is absolutely the way to go because you don't want disputes over that. And if you're up north, cooling as well. The noise thing, and look, that depends again on what the house is. If you've got a property that was a dwelling that you've converted, it can be a bit hard to combat. If you're building new, absolutely you want to design for that in what you do for soundproofing and how far you go. Whether just sound check, plaster and bats is enough, whether you need to do party walls. Layout can help a lot as well, like not having necessarily minimising the shared walls, like putting things like wardrobes, bathrooms, and things like that, on shared walls, so you can minimise the noise that goes between rooms. Look at hotels. I mean, they've pretty much got it figured out.
Spot on. That's it. It's probably a pretty good model on a smaller scale. Basically. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You've touched on the importance of design and layout, and that would apply to you, but also to conversions. I would have thought, which would probably play a big part in what you're doing. In your experience, how does the layout and design of a rooming house affect this tenant longevity then, mate?
Look, it makes a really big difference. If I talk about my own experience when I started doing this, I was, I think, and I can see where people are coming from now when they're first getting into it. I was putting in lounge rooms and all sorts of things like that. I learned pretty quickly they're a pretty bad idea. So my main thing is to minimise the common areas and make the rooms as comfortable as you can, if that's where you want them spending time away from other people. I mean, it's I suppose short thing, make the common areas small and uncomfortable, and private areas large and comfortable, and that's what you're getting the rent for too. So it makes more sense from that point of view. That works. That works a lot better. So, and when I said hotels before, part of the design there is trying to create an entrance to the room so that you've got where they're sleeping as far from the hallway as you can, and blocked by things like
Yes. So we get some really good suggestions there, because from a newbie coming in, it's almost contrarian. You go, well, let's make it really, the common space is really, really fun. But what you're probably doing is you're bringing people together that otherwise wouldn't, and you're actually inciting the arguments sooner than what they might occur if they were there. So by making rooms really comfortable and allowing the residents to spend more time in the rooms because it's laid out in the way that they're comfortable doing that, then you're actually de-risking the conflict to a certain degree. So no, that makes good sense.
Yeah, that's right. It's a big part of the design. And I did touch on it. I can see where people are coming from with that, and trying to create something where there'll be some socialisation. And look, that's part of it, but that's usually better outdoors, or if they want to socialise one-on-one, they can visit one another in their rooms.
Makes perfect sense. No, I like your thinking about that. You touched on the importance of management earlier. Let's dive into that a bit more and get your thoughts on how important is a good manager, and probably where do you find one?
Well, look, I think it's pretty vital. And look, reality is it's probably a little bit of a gap in the market still at the moment. I mean, there's companies out there saying that they do it, and there's real estate agents that'll do it. Most of them, I'm generalising a bit because there are some good ones, but most of them aren't great at it. And I think if you look at how property management typically works, the work is in renting the property, ongoing, making sure people have paid their rent and things like that. There's not a lot, and there might be 6 monthly inspections and things like that. And if I talk Victorian terms, in rooming houses in the legislation there, we can inspect rooms every 4 weeks. So to give you an idea of how more amplified that is.
Wow. Not
that you're necessarily going to do that, because that's a bit of an intrusion on people and might not be great for them. But at least you've got the opportunity to do that if there's should the need arise, and to keep an eye on things and manage things. Now, most real estate agencies wouldn't be equipped for that, and wouldn't be equipped for the ongoing operational stuff that's required. I mean, one of the things, I'll say this because I use this a little bit, in the Residential Tenancies Act, there's your normal tenancies, there's rooming houses, there's caravan parks and retirement villages. I don't think too many investors would go buy a caravan park and get their local real estate agent to manage it.
That's right.
So my question then is, why do you think they can do rooming houses? And look, and there are specialists that do it and are good at it, but they need to have the understanding of it and the experience at doing it. So reality is it's vital, and it's not about going and picking who's going to do it for the lowest rate. It's who's going to get you the best longevity of tenancies and therefore your best net return, and look after your property the best.
100%. In the old days, this is the old days, mate, because I'm showing my age here, Mark. But my good mother used to live in a boarding house in Ballarat when she was a telephonist way back in the 50s, 40s and 50s. And in those days, I remember she used to say that one of the other boarders was actually the manager, and they got either discounted or free rent for living there, but they were basically then tasked with managing the property and keeping the feuds down. Is that something that's still relevant today, or are there other more reliable options in terms of management that are more effective?
Yeah, look, there's some situations where that's happening and it's working reasonably well. It tends to be more suited to larger properties. Like if you've got 30 residents or something like that, you might want an on-site manager.
Yeah.
The challenge that I suppose occurs around it is whether it goes to that person's head, and they tend to be a bit of a standover person in the house, and I'm in charge, I set the rules. Yeah. So it can create issues as well.
Yes.
So I'm personally not a fan of it, especially in domestic scale stuff. Yeah. Like if you've got 9 rooms or something like that, or even less, like 5 in Queensland, I think there's a real risk with it.
Yeah.
And in doing that, same thing. I'd never do anything as a deal on the rent. So it's like you don't get a discount on rent or a free rent. You pay your rent and you get paid for work you do.
Yeah. It starts to work. It gets pretty messy, doesn't it? Way around. No, very well said, and you're right. It could very well make things worse, not better, by adding angst into the free occupation of a space that might not otherwise be there. So a very good point. I guess to bring it to a head then, how do we learn more about best practice in establishing and operating rooming houses then, Mark?
Well, I'm going to suggest, like Victoria at least, has a peak industry body, so the Registered Accommodation Association of Victoria, so raav.org.au. They produce a best practice guide on behalf of Consumer Affairs and support a lot of operators and stuff like that. So I would suggest in Victoria at least, RAV. Other things is looking at state government websites, Victoria be Consumer Affairs, Office of Fair Trading in Queensland. Yeah. It used to be Housing and Public Works Office of Fair Trading in New South Wales. Used to be Housing and Public Works in Queensland. That's changed. I can't remember what it is now, but some of the government websites have got a lot of good information. Yeah. It's documents on minimum standards that are readily available in each of those states as well. So I'd suggest that's a good start, and RAV would be a good contact anyway, even if you're in another state, to get an idea of what best practice is in that state and how you can apply that in your case.
Yeah, perfectly said. And then of course, given you're on the show,
get in touch with me. I can help out too.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, given that's your area. So I guess that brings us to a perfect close, because I really want to thank you for deepening our understanding of the whys and wherefores of rooming houses, Mark. And we do suggest that anyone who wants to learn more reaches out to you at roominghouse.expert by clicking the link in the show notes. So thanks again for sharing all this with us on the show today, Mark.
No worries, thank you.
Successful property investment is a game of finance. Do you have the right team and the right game plan? Realty Talk is brought to you by Know How Property. More than mortgage brokers, Bushy Martin and his team of investment architects set you up with a sustainable strategy structured to lower your costs, tax, risk and stress while increasing your capacity for growth. Know How has helped over 1,900 homeowners and investors secure more than $800 million in property wealth. So get set to live more, work less, and live your legacy. Want to know how to invest in your freedom? Visit knowhowproperty.com.au.
This is Realty Talk, powered by realty.com.au.
Now, imagine being in a job where you're always the meat in the sandwich and at the short end of a funnel where everyone's competing demands end up as your responsibility. Well, welcome to the world of property management, where you're constantly twisted and torn trying to solve everyone's problems, from the competing stress of tenant needs, landlord demands, and increasing pressure oftentimes from business owners to do more with less. But as we all know, the quality and consistency of property management is actually key to your long-term investment performance. So to discuss how to reduce cumulative stress and restore balance and productivity in this quite mission-critical aspect of yours and everyone's investment success, we're joined by Moni Mazzeo, founder of the largest independent property management company in South Australia, the Rental Property Network. And she's completed a master's degree focused on the mental health of the property management industry. So, looking forward to getting into that. So let's see how we need to change, and welcome to Realty Talk, Molly.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, this is a subject that doesn't get much airplay, but is, I think, critical to the future of the industry overall. But I guess where I'd love to start with that is to get you to talk us through what sort of challenges and problems you see property managers facing that's actually impacting negatively on them, as well as inhibiting investment performance.
Yeah, look, it's one of the major things from my research was a lack of support. Now, if you'd asked me that pre me undertaking this research, it's not what I actually would have suggested, but support just became that overwhelming topic. It flowed through all the way, a theme right the way through the research. And so if you look at property managers being burnt out, overworked with big portfolios, it's just not sustainable long term. They're overwhelmed, they're stressed, they're telling me their mental health is suffering, which obviously impacts the ability for the individual to undertake the duties of the role, and obviously also the quality of the output. So firstly, there are a couple of other things. Firstly, lack of support was a main one. It's an eternal problem, isn't it? Too many properties per property manager. We watched that through decades. I know since my career started, I've had those discussions, and you transition from being a salesperson to a principal, and suddenly the shoe's on the other foot, and you're looking at the business from different eyes, for sure. Yeah. But that large portfolio, too big a portfolio for an individual to manage in a 38-hour week, was a real theme throughout the research. Yeah. The lack of support obviously affects self-esteem, job satisfaction. It inhibits the property manager from providing, in many cases, the service that they want to provide. And I think what was really frightening from the research, firstly, half of the property managers that I spoke to ended up in tears, were really quite distressed about what they were having to deal with in the role. But the severity of the impact on some individuals, and it ranged from a negative impact at home to contributing to the end of marriages and some significant mental health crises where people were having some really significant implications throughout their home and themselves. So to me, that's disappointing. I don't want to see that for anybody in any job, but particularly property management, where we build relationships with lots of people over a long, long time. These relationships go for decades. And so they need to be mutual relationships. And by mutual, I mean with all the parties, all of the stakeholders, the principals, the property management team, the investors, the tenants. It needs to be more collaborative, I think. Yep. That was one of the challenges. Yep. Investors, we'll talk a little bit later about how they can help. There's obviously things they can do. But one of the other things that property managers spoke about was a lack of training. And they highlighted this across the board as being a real issue. Lack of practical skills, and not necessarily having the skill set to undertake particular elements of the role. And that was found to increase stress and reduce job satisfaction. So once again, if you think about that laterally, it's obviously going to have an impact on their output as property managers. Yep. And in that training, they also spoke about legislation changes and the stress that the legislation changes were causing them in terms of their understanding of it, their processing of it, changing their systems, their policies, their procedures, just not having a really good grip on it and not having a sounding board. It linked back to support because then they said that they didn't have a sounding board to go to someone in the office to say, oh, what does this mean? Or how do I practically, because legislation's one thing and then there's the practical way that we deal with it.
Yes.
What do we do here in practical terms in this particular situation? As an investor, I think long term, realistically, if you have enough property and you're investing for long enough, something's bound to go wrong. I'm not suggesting that it should or whatever, but it probably will. The likelihood of you having a tenant that perhaps is in arrears or some damages is very real if you're in this for long enough. Yeah. And while it's my hope that agencies and property managers never place a bad tenant, if property managers, tenants change. So we may place a tenant that is an exceptional tenant at the time. We put them in the property, but life happens. You think about the Ds of real estate: death, debt, drugs, divorce, disaster, domestic violence. All of these things can impact what was once a good tenant and move them from, say, a Category A tenant down to a, say, Category D tenant. And these things happen, and we need to be prepared for them. But think for a moment what that toll takes on property managers who are at the coalface of these situations. And many of them are really, really unpleasant. I think I mentioned to you earlier, we have about every 9 months, we will have a death of a tenant in a property.
Mm.
And if you think about that and a property manager walking into that, it really can impact the mental health and well-being of the individuals.
100%. I think the thing that gets missed often is the consistency and the longevity of that stress and pressure. It's not isolated events that happen now and then. This is constant day to day, and that sort of burnout that results from that accumulative pressure over time is something I just don't think is really understood or taken on board. So no, and as you say, it's not a matter of if there's going to be an issue on a property, it's when it occurs, but making sure you've got the right team around you that has the contingencies in place to actually deal with it. And if you've got a property manager who's stressed to the eyeballs, has no headspace to be able to deal with that, well, that's where the potential issues are going to arise. So, look, I guess it's a good flow on to what I want to ask you next, and that is, what is the impact of all this on investors and landlords then, as you see it, Moni?
Well, half of the participants of the study that I did had a physiological reaction to stress. So that might be sweating, heart palpitations, nausea. I mentioned crying earlier, but 30% had suffered a significant mental health crisis because of work pressures. So one participant said the abuse, it just doesn't stop. Another was touching her chest, and one of the benefits of the research that I did was that it was like we're doing now, so I could see them. It was interviews, and it was touching her chest and said it just hurt here all the time. As an investor, just think about that for a moment and think about the property manager's ability to effectively manage your property. If they've just been abused by a tenant in the workplace from another investor, in most cases, they're simply not equipped to deal with that. And the toll, you mentioned long-term, there are studies on this, long-term impacts through the cause of burnout when you are exposed to this level of stress consistently, day in, day out. And property managers, I think this is forgotten with lots of people, and investors included. The emotional aspects of their daily work life is not dissimilar to those that healthcare workers or other service workers experience. And that prolonged exposure decreases job satisfaction, and it increases the likelihood of burnout. Yeah. We're dealing with heightened emotions. You think about the big events in people's lives. Moving house is one of those events. And the heightened emotions, if they've got excessive workload, so they're already dealing with people that are in a heightened state because they need a home. We're in the midst of a housing crisis here in South Australia, so that exasperates the matter. Yep. But then they've got a high workload, and then they're dealing with physical and emotional abuse. Now, it's not just emotional. That shocked me. That I had property managers talking about physical abuse. We should be safe in our workplace. We should be able to do this role and go to work and feel safe when we're doing that.
Yeah.
For investors, having a property manager who is either not equipped to deal with this or who is not supported through this, it really has the potential to negatively impact that investment.
Yeah, totally. And I guess that once the productivity drops down, then you don't have to be Einstein to work out that it's going to impact on the actual management of the property. So I guess the obvious question now then, Moni, is how can this actually be improved and what needs to change?
Look, I had a whole lot of suggestions, recommendations at the end of my report. Property managers are asking for enhanced support systems, so a more supportive work environment, which can be achieved through things like mentorship, but also just regular check-ins. So, and that can be the investor, it can be the principal, it can be a colleague. Hey, let's grab a coffee. Let's meet for a coffee. Let's just have a chat. giving them that opportunity just to defrag a little bit, or share, just, a problem shared, or is the problem shared as a problem lessened or something?
Yes.
Just sharing that and giving them somewhere an outlet. Regular training, obviously was included as a recommendation. Training on soft skills is really important. Stress management, mental health, first aid, emotional intelligence, and customer service skills was an interesting one that I hadn't really considered, but was highlighted by several of the participants as they just didn't have those customer service skills to deal with certain situations. Because depending on what you say, you can escalate a situation or you can de-escalate it, and they haven't had the training.
Yeah, it makes sense. If you're defensive, that triggers off a whole cascade of other issues, where if you know how to absorb that and empathise in a way that diffuses a situation and that doesn't elevate to that point. So, yeah, very good points.
100%. And also they've been asking, and this doesn't perhaps, well, not directly, a lot of this investors might sit back and think, well, it doesn't really affect me, but it does. And that's the point that I'm trying to make. An organisation to have a good EAP, which is an employee assistance program, that they can reach out to in the event they have had a situation that has upset them or caused them stress, or if it's been a death of a tenant or whatever, somewhere they can reach out and get the help that they need. In the processing applications, we can talk about that. And just if you look at the series of events that a property manager does, and you look at, I've got a new property to market. What's a new landlord? We're going to take care of that. We advertise. We have to do that. We then get to open inspections. We have to do that because somebody's got to be there. We have to do the lease. We have to lodge a bond. There's an application process in there. And if you look at the weak points of the whole spectrum of the tasks that we do, processing of applications is one that corners can be cut.
Yes.
And especially when a property, and I'm not saying there's property managers out there wanting to do this, but when they're overwhelmed, overworked, stress, all of the other things they can't cut. They have to do the lease. They have to lodge the bond. There are legislative requirements for some of these things. The processing of the application is one, and investors will also know, if you've been investing for a while, ingoings and outgoings is another one. There are your weak points that can potentially have corners cut.
Yeah, no, very well said. So I guess the obvious question here for investors is, what do investor landlords need to be doing or thinking differently in order to actually help property managers, and by doing so, in turn, actually end up helping themselves?
I might not like my first answer, but I'll say it anyway. And I'll challenge investors to be less price-driven and more concerned with the technical skills of the property manager and the support that's provided to the property manager, the well-being that's around them, the well-being policies within the organisation. The investors, in my mind, spend so much time researching, analysing all of the analytics with areas and growth and council reports and strategic plans from council and everything else that I hear investors doing. And then they get to the property management, and let's say they had two properties, maybe one at 450, one at 470. I'm talking Adelaide terms. Yeah. If the 470 was going to give them a significantly better outcome, they're probably going with that one. They're not going to say, oh no, I'll take the much lesser outcome and the less capital growth and for $20,000. Yeah. But then we get to selecting a property manager, and suddenly we're so price driven as investors, and that does not support the business model that I'm speaking about, with all of the support around the property manager and all of the initiatives that can help them and keep them in the industry. And we haven't talked today, but I'm sure you've spoken before about the churn of property managers.
Totally.
We want to stop that. And the way that investors can stop that is to think a little bit more. These are significant investments. We all know that, we're investors. Why then are we so price driven when it comes to the property manager? And that's something that's a switch that investors can click and immediately make. But also use effective communication strategies. Understand that the property manager is on your side. So this comes down to how an investor selects a property manager. And I think there's lots of things that can be done there. I think it's super important that we don't lay blame on property managers for some of the things that are going wrong and for some of the corner cutting that I've spoken about. Yeah. These are upper management issues, not property manager issues. And so that's where the fault lies, not in the actual property managers. They're all out there trying to do the best they can with what they have.
Yeah.
But as investors, ask some real questions. When you're selecting property managers, really ask the question, what supports are in place for you as a property manager if you encounter any abuse in the role? That will give the investor a good idea of what's happening internally. Look for anything that's outward facing in terms of how they support their property managers. Do they have things, or do they advocate for things like mental health first aid or EAPs? What's outward facing from the organisation that the investor can actually have a look at and go, okay, I can see that they've got a really good framework here. They're very supportive. That'll give you a clue in terms of what's going on. But one of the big clues is also fees. In that, I'm not saying you have to go with the most expensive, but really have a look at those fees and question, if you're right at the bottom end of those fees, do you think seriously that the property manager is going to get all of the support that they need? Because I'd argue it's not feasible.
100%. Look, we've only really just scratched the surface, but you've highlighted some really important issues there. So I really want to thank you, Moni, because you've really made it clear that if you're an investor, having a property manager that's suffering burnout, overwork, overwhelm, stress, or poor mental health is obviously going to impact the quality of output and therefore the sustainability and viability of their investment. And that clearly more support from everyone involved, including training on stress management and emotional intelligence, along with creating some sort of flexibility in the work environment, is actually going to be key to everyone's benefit moving forward. And investors actually need to ask better questions to determine this, so that they're actually focused on service value and not just cost. In what I'd like to call, Moni, excuse my breath here, but we want to focus on mental wealth as well as mental health, because if the investor thinks that way and takes a long-term approach rather than a short-term, we're going to end up with a better outcome for everyone. So look, I really want to thank you for bringing all of this to our attention, and thanks for your time on the show today, Moni.
Thank you.
Are you curious about harnessing your super for property investment? Propel your future with the enlightening online seminar, The Ultimate Masterclass to Self-Managed Super Fund Property Mastery. Reserve your spot now at getrare.com.au/SMSF. Spearheaded by Rusty from independent buyers agency Get Rare Properties, this masterclass unravels strategic property investment using your self-managed superannuation fund. You know, it's not just about learning. It's about transforming your financial future through education. So embrace this opportunity to enrich your investing acumen. Enroll now in the free masterclass and begin a journey that marries insight with action, leading to a financially empowered tomorrow.
Unlock bonus content now as a premium subscriber.
That brings us to the end of this week's show. Make sure you don't miss a single episode of Realty Talk or Bushy's Get Invested podcast, both delivered to you each week. And you can do that by subscribing to the Property Hub now on your favourite podcast player or wherever you are listening to or watching this show. Also, join the conversation anytime on Facebook. All you have to do is search the Property Hub Collective. Thanks to our supporters and content partners, realty.com.au, BMT Tax Depreciation, Know How Property Finance, Get Rare Property, and Apiro Marketing. I'm Kevin Turner, and on behalf of Bushy, Martin and the Property Hub team, we look forward to seeing you again next week.